You spent $10,000 on a big block. You spent $5,000 on a period-correct M22 Rock Crusher, and you just got out-launched by a minivan. For 40 years, Chevy guys have treated the Muncie 4-speed like a holy relic. The Rock Crusher tag on your cowl induction hood means you won. It means your build is legitimate. It means the people who know. But while you were worshiping a nickname, the physics stopped caring. The Muncie gave you two choices for first gear across its entire 12-year production run. The transmission everyone calls smog-era junk, the Borg-Warner Super T10, gave you 4. And that difference is not a footnote. It is the reason your clutch smells like a charcoal grill every time you leave a stoplight. The math does not care about your nostalgia. Let's get into it. The legend. Before we tear anything apart, let's be precise about what we are actually talking about, because this video is not going to survive the comment section if it gets the facts wrong. The Muncie ran from 1963 to 1974, 3 variants. The M20 wide ratio with about a 2.5-to-1 first gear, 2.56 on the early cars, 2.52 from 1966 onward. The M21 and M22 close ratio, both at 2.20. The difference between the M21 and M22 is not the ratios are identical. The difference is the gear cut. The M22 runs a much straighter, roughly 20-degree helix angle versus the roughly 30-degree cut on the M20 and M21. Here is why that matters, and it is not what most people think. Straighter gears are not stronger than helical gears in terms of raw load capacity. Helical gears actually distribute load across more tooth surface simultaneously. The reason GM spec'd the M22 behind the nastiest engines they built is more specific than that. The straighter helix angle on the M22 reduces the axial thrust load generated under high torque, less sideways force pushing against the aluminum case walls. In an engine making well over 500 horsepower at the crank, the L88 427 is often quoted in the mid-500s, regardless of the 430 GM printed on the spec sheet. That case protection matters. The trade-off is noise. Less gear face in contact at any given moment means more mechanical sound from the mesh. That sound is the Rock Crusher whine. And behind the L88 427 Corvette, you did not get to pick. The M22 was effectively mandatory. If you ordered an L88 427, it came with the Rock Crusher. GM was not going to put a street transmission behind a purpose-built race car. That is a real credential. The M22 deserved that car and that reputation. What it does not deserve is being treated as the correct answer for every 4-speed build, regardless of the engine, the rear axle, and the way the car actually gets driven. Because that is where the legend stops being useful and starts being expensive. The pain. We need to talk about the 2.20. If you're running an M21 or M22, your first gear is 2.20 to 1. In 1970, it worked. You know why? Because the factory paired it with 3.73 or 4.11 rear gears and a tire that was basically a rubber band stretched over a steel wheel. The total mechanical multiplication between the engine and the road was high enough that the car launched hard even with a tall first gear in the transmission. But you're not building that car. You're running 3.36 or 3.08 rear gears because you want to drive on the highway without turning 4,000 RPM at 70 miles an hour. That decision, the sensible one, the street-friendly one, just turned your close ratio Muncie into a liability. Here's the math. M21 or M22 at 2.20 first gear times 3.36 rear gears. Your overall first gear ratio is 7.39 to 1. That is not a performance number. That is a number for an engine that is trying to move 3,000 pounds through a straw. Now run the Super T10 with a 2.88 first gear against that same 3.36 rear axle. Your overall ratio is 9.68 to 1. That's a 31% increase in mechanical leverage between your engine and the road. 31%. That's not a rounding error. That's the difference between tires that hook and an engine that bogs while a Chrysler minivan pulls away from you at a light. You did not need more horsepower. You needed a gearbox built for the car you actually own. Now, the M20 wide ratio is better than the M21 and M22 for street use. That lower first gear gives you more launch leverage without needing steep rear gears. But the M20 carries its own problem. The drop from third to fourth gear is a massive RPM fall. The engine leaves the power band on that highway shift like someone reached in and turned off a switch. You trade the launch problem for a cruising problem, and you still end up with fewer ratio options than the transmission everyone told you to ignore. The Great, the Trail. Here is what the Muncie crowd does not want posted in the comments. The original Borg-Warner T10, the unit that went into Corvettes starting in 1957, was legitimately weak. GM replaced it with the Muncie in 1963, specifically because the T10 could not keep up with the horsepower GM was making. That replacement was the right call. The early T10 earned its weak reputation, and the Muncie earned its place by being genuinely better. The Super T10 is not that transmission. While GM was running the Muncie through the 1960s and early 1970s, Borg-Warner was not standing still. The second design Super T10 that came back into GM cars in the mid-70s was thoroughly upgraded. Stronger cases and side covers, often cast iron, improved internals, and a 26-spline input with multiple heavy-duty gear sets designed for higher torque capacity. Transmission builders also point to larger bearings and a stouter countershaft than the early aluminum T10. It was not a part spin solution. It was a ground-up recalibration. The side cover upgrade is the detail worth understanding. The aluminum side cover is where a significant amount of a 4-speed structural rigidity lives. Under sustained high torque, the helical gears inside a Muncie generate axial thrust loads that push against that aluminum side cover. When it flexes, and under hard use it does flex, bearing alignment shifts, gear mesh geometry changes. Teeth that were designed to contact across their full face start loading off-center. That is how you turn a healthy transmission into an expensive rebuild. The aftermarket knew this. Companies built reinforced Muncie side covers and cases specifically to fix a problem the factory never fully solved. The existence of those products is the acknowledgement written in steel. And here's the racing credential the Muncie crowd almost never brings up because it belongs to the other side. Borg-Warner T10 and Super T10 based 4-speeds became a go-to foundation for NASCAR stock car transmissions, often in heavily modified form, which gives that design real racing credentials far beyond its so-called smog-era junk reputation. Meanwhile, the Muncie's legend mostly grew on the street and at the car shows, not in long-duration circle track races. GM did not switch to the Super T10 because it was cheap. The engineers made that call. The racers made that call. The only people who did not make that call were the ones who turned a nickname into a religion. The verdict. Numbers matching restoration, concourse build, original drivetrain. Buy the Muncie. It belongs in that car. Full stop. But if you're building a car to drive, if you want that hit in the small of your back at the green light, if you want first gear to actually work with the rear axle you chose and the engine you built, then stop letting the mythology make your mechanical decisions. Sell the Muncie to someone who cares about date codes. Find a 2.64 or 2.88 Super T10. Drive away from the argument permanently. The Rock Crusher earned its name behind the cars that deserved it. The L88, the LS6, the COPO. That is real, and that is permanent. But most of you aren't building those cars. Most of you are building a street car with a street engine in street gears, and you want it to feel like a weapon every time you pull out of a parking lot. For that car, the one sitting in your garage right now, the math already made the decision. The Rock Crusher earned its name. Just make sure it's crushing the right combination.